Hello again, and welcome back to the Stir Crazy podcast. I'm Rob Nelson.
And I'm Mike Bachov, and I'm going to share a joke that the Stuhr Kids account shared earlier. If you're not a fan, go to at Stuhr Kids on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. But hey, Rob, what do you call a portly pumpkin?
I don't even know if I want to know this, but tell me.
Call it a plumpkin. I thought it was great.
Yeah,
I laughed at it.
I love it, I'm doing my best.
Well, the reason we're talking about pumpkins at all is that we are going to do a special Halloween episode, and man, we've got some relatively spooky stuff for a history podcast coming up.
Yeah, I think so. We are going to be talking with Kari Stofer, who's our head curator here, as well as Samantha Stump, who's a curatorial technician. They've both been around the block here at Stuhr Museum for a number of years. They've handled all the artifacts that have come into the collection, and some of them have been here for quite a long time. And there have been a few spooky encounters that each of them have experienced over the years, and we're gonna talk to them about all of those interactions.
And then from there, we're going to talk to Kim Alex, who is a ghost hunter here in Hall County, and she's gone out to a couple different places and maybe has seen some things. So we're gonna get a little spooky, a little away from maybe the intellectual fare, but I think it'll be fun, and we can tie it back to history.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation with Kim. I'd like to tie in what she investigates with the history that we interpret here at the museum. But this is just going to be one episode in the upcoming series of episodes that we're doing this season that are going to be dealing with holiday-specific themes. So this week is Halloween. Later on in the season, we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving. We're going to be talking about Christmas. So stick with us, and we'll be back after these words. Welcome to a very spooky edition of the Stir Crazy podcast. This is your host, Rob Nelson. I'm here with curator Kari Stofer and curatorial technician Samantha Stump, here to talk about the Halloween season and the history of Halloween and just spooky things in general. Thanks for the both of you being on the show.
Hello.
So why don't we jump in? I know this is a history-themed podcast. Why don't we start off talking a little bit about the history of Halloween? I know that Halloween... I did just a little bit of research myself on this topic, and it dates back surprisingly further than I would have ever guessed. I've heard of, All Hallows Eve and like the origins in that way, but I was surprised to find out that it actually dates back to something like 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dates back all the way to the Celts.
Yeah, the Druids
but I think the same concept has always been there, is that it's the night where the veil is less between the living and the dead, or the spirits and the ancestors versus the living.
There was a holiday that they celebrated. It was pronounced Samhain. It was November 1st. It marked the end of their new year at that time, and it was believed that at the time of the harvest, that was kind of the end of the season associated with light and warmth, and the onset of cold and death and misery was about to approach them. So why not make a celebration out of it?
Well, and pray to the spirits that you would be protected or passed over, or that good fortune would come your way rather than all of those dreaded, creepy things.
Yeah, and fortunes were actually part of it, as were, I think, animal sacrifices and things of that nature. They actually wore costumes sometimes, but mostly of animal heads and skins, so not the most...
Well, they didn't have the Dollar Tree just around the corner.
That's a very good point.
I think that's what they had. But that was, I think there's a lot of myth with that too. And so some people say Samhain, and that's how it's pronounced, and that's come into popular culture. Just throw out a thing, it was a supernatural episode where they actually made Sam Hain into a character who was Sam Hain. So you can find all sorts of different variations on the original Celtic tradition.
Well, why don't we fast forward a little bit and talk about the period that we interpret at Stuhr Museum, which is the late 19th, early 20th century. Some of the Halloween traditions became a little bit more recognizable, not necessarily entirely so, but what were some of the things happening around this community during those years?
There was kind of a pretty steady stream in that time period of vandalism.
Yes, absolutely.
happening on All Hallows. So we actually have a photo in our collection of a buggy sitting on top of a school roof.
Oh, really?
Yes. One of those great mysteries on how they got it up there.
Yeah.
But I believe in the file, it says that the lady actually remembers going to school the next day and the buggy being on the roof and her grandmother just being irate about it.
I'm a little bit surprised that it stayed on the roof. I'm imagining a slanted roof. Was there an emergency brake on?
No, from what I remember, it
buggy?
is a pitched roof.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, gosh.
It's just balanced properly on
and
top.
they did have brakes on them. I mean, they did have like emergency brakes, but I wouldn't think that it would overcome gravity.
Yeah,
with that.
exactly. Yeah, this isn't
But that was a Halloween prank?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an All Hallows prank.
I guess the expression is this isn't your grandma's vandalism, but maybe it is your grandma's vandalism in this.
Maybe she kind
instance.
of beat your vandalism.
Yeah.
She can outdo you.
I found a few instances just going through some old newspapers in our archive about some rather elaborate pranks performed by the local youth. One of which was they broke into Ott's Hose Company, the firehouse there, unreeled the entire hose, tangled it up, making the use of water for that fire department useless. They also tried to steal the fire trucks that night.
Oh my gosh.
Some of the other things I found were people cut down telephone poles. They took up sidewalks. They tried to remove sidewalks from the grounds of public places.
These are like serious pranks.
So it sounded more like The Purge than it did any Halloween night that I've
There's
been
even
a part
accounts of Grant Renard, who's a fairly famous American artist who is from Grand Island.
Mm-hmm.
And he participated and had fond memories of being the perpetrator.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, he talks about that a little bit in the, there's a book that we read about him. And yeah, he said that he got in quite a bit of trouble for what he did and didn't get in trouble for a lot of the other things he did.
So let's talk more about the spooky instances that come about in the history of Stuhr Museum itself, or maybe in the neighborhood at large. I know Sam has been working at Stuhr Museum for quite a while, and she's had a few run-ins, I believe, of the spooky nature.
I have. My first run-in was years and years ago. I am the curatorial technician now, but I used to work in the visitor service area. And we had a group that came in that toured the facility. And then when they were leaving, they realized that one of their residents was missing. And they asked us to help look for her. And so I went back behind our stage area. Before we redid the Stuhr Building, we had a stage, and it was kind of used for storage at the time. But I went back there, and I was searching around for the light, and I called out, hello, and someone answered back, hi.
What?
Uh-huh.
I haven't heard this one.
It was a man's voice. There was nobody back there with me. And so I wrenched the ridiculously heavy door open, by the way.
Yeah.
That door was insane. Like, you could not close that door. You could not open that door easily. But wrenched it open and booked it on out of there.
Yeah.
That was one heck of an experience.
I thought you were going to tell a story about the guns in the Stuhr Museum Collections building. I did not hear about this story before.
Okay. Well, we've got a couple stories from the collections building, too. We've had instances where we go into our storage area, and we had a couple weeks in a row where there would be a singular object previously on a shelf that was just placed in the middle of the aisle. Like, it didn't fall, it didn't roll, it was placed there.
Wow.
Yeah.
If anyone listening can kind of imagine, our collections building houses all of the artifacts donated by you, the public, and they are on evenly spaced rows of shelves, potentially 8 feet apart from each other. So to have an item just kind of sitting in the middle of the row, seemingly undisturbed and with no explanation as to how it got there, especially since the collection building is locked down each and every day when everyone leaves.
Everybody I could find, and every situation that could explain it, I tried to track down.
Yeah,
and
no one
never
had
came up with an answer.
No one had been in there between when we were there the night before and that next morning for several of the incidents. The other one, of course, is a bigger one, was that we walked into our vault where we keep our larger firearms, and normally they sit at a very straight upright position.
Yeah, they're housed vertically.
Vertically, yep.
With foam in between them,
Yep.
supporting them.
Yeah, they're very well kept. We walked in there one day, and the entire row on both sides had been laid down so that they were bridging themselves across the way. There was no damage. There was no evidence that they had fallen. They were just laying
like in
down.
Perfect domino style.
Yeah.
It was
Like-
domino style, or was it like, I thought it was like,
Well, it was like domino style as they fell on opposite directions on either side.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the room, they crossed over to make a bridge.
Yeah. It's like if you were bridging a deck of cards in the shuffling mode.
oh, so kind of like interlocking fingers
Right,
almost.
yeah.
Like if you held your hands out in front of you
Yeah.
interlocked. That's
Not
just
one
crazy.
touched the floor.
That's
Not
just
one touched the
absolutely
floor.
crazy.
That room is entirely separated from everything else.
Separate lock.
Separate lock.
It's a locked room inside of a locked room.
Yeah.
Inside of a locked and alarmed
and-
building.
Yes.
Nothing in the rest of the building had been moved. It was just that room.
Do you attribute these sorts of things, either of you, this is for, either of you to answer, to items that are in our collection or to a general presence in general at the museum?
I can't say for sure. I mean, you have 10,000 items in your collection. Something is bound to have some sort of attachment to it if you believe in that. I
don't know.
just don't
I'm not
know.
convinced, but I also can't explain it.
Sure.
It's very unexplainable.
What's interesting is that we have cameras,
Mhm.
and nothing was captured on the cameras.
Yeah, nothing.
It's even when, which I think is a little spooky too, we had some glass break in the Stuhr Building, and it was tempered glass. So that is tiny little pieces that explode and go everywhere if it breaks, which it did.
Yeah.
And it was not picked up on the 4 cameras in that room.
Mhm.
But I helped sweep it up the next day, so
Yeah.
I know what happened.
If there were objects that had some kind of attachment, as you said, Sam, what would some of those objects be, do you think, in our collection?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
are there a few spooky items, I guess is what I'm asking.
I would say that we have a couple items in our collection that that could be considered spooky. One of my favorite items in our collection is a mechanical doll, an automaton. And the first time I went to get her down off the shelf, she played me a little music. Her music box is stuck. You can't turn the key.
Wow.
So I can't explain that one.
Before you touched it or after you touched it?
As soon as I picked it up. I mean, we've got mourning dresses in our collection that a woman would wear when somebody died, mainly a husband or a child, and they would wear it for a year and a day.
Sure.
A full black dress with veil attachment too.
And by full, she means not an inch of skin showing. I mean, down to the wrist, probably wearing gloves.
Yep.
Down to the toe with
Black
boots, with a neck piece that would go up to the chin.
Yep.
And then probably a veil over the face.
Yeah.
It's essentially a walking shadow of some
Yep.
kind.
Well, and the part of the idea was to make it look like you were as miserable as you could be.
Yes.
In that entire mourning period. We also we have a Ouija board in our collection.
Of course.
We do not have the planchette to go with it.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Is that the name for the the dial or whatever. Okay.
Yep.
It's called a planchet. I've never heard
Planchet, yep. Which they were actually sold by games and toy companies. And this one does have a toy maker mark on it. And then we do have a burial suit.
I know you've done some research on that lately. I'd be interested to hear what you found out about that item.
And so, the burial suit is called a sham burial suit, is the official title of it. They were used when the family maybe couldn't afford to let the person's best suits go. So, I mean, originally what the idea would be that you were buried in your absolute best clothes. You wanted to look your best in life and in death. And a funeral was a very important part of that final goodbye, the end of your life. They wanted to dress their loved ones very well. Well, oftentimes you didn't have a large array of clothing to wear. And especially if you were not wealthy, you couldn't afford to let that best suit go.
Sure.
You know, your husband died. Maybe your son could wear that suit someday. And so in order to preserve those nice clothes, you could pay $10 to $40 for a custom-made burial suit. The back of the suit was left open. It often had a long train to the bottom of it. And so it could easily be fitted onto the person. You didn't have to do a lot of maneuvering with the body. And you could then bury that person in essentially half a suit.
Yeah. We don't really follow that practice anymore, I don't feel like.
Well, no, but, you know, in doing some research, I think we're going different ways. I think when you think about the concept, it's about recycling, saving, being thrifty. And nowadays you can basically get buried in a soy paper suit if you want.
Something that is easily biodegradable and not going to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
Also, some of these new burial clothes that they're making, they make them out of spores and mushrooms, and they help in decomposition of the body.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I had not heard that.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of great creative things you can do with the body.
Well, I know the funeral industry is a ever-changing market to make money, so that doesn't surprise me, I guess I should say.
Well, and actually there are some funeral services that are advocating for less cost and more natural burials, so that you're not buried in a casket, you're not embalmed, and you're not preserved for all time. Your body naturally decomposes, and that's it.
I have heard of that movement. It's this is going to be completely speculation because I don't know. Is this part of it, the effort to like kind of reduce cemetery sizes as well? Because they take up so much property. Like, we're lucky in America that we have an, seemingly infinite frontier space that you can find plots for a cemetery. But in a place like Korea or an island nation, there's just only so many places you can really bury people.
Even in America, I think it's becoming a problem. Yep. And they even have a situation now where you can go and you can instead of being cremated, you go and become mulched. Mm-hmm. Oh. And so they decompose you, they make your body into mulch, and then the family can pick you up and then mulch you into the apple orchard or into the farmland or homestead or wherever you want to go.
Well, that's definitely something.
Yeah. Little on the creepy and bizarre, and yet, practical. Same thing like back in our time period that we focus on. I mean, it was very practical that if you had a child pass away or a loved one and you hadn't had their photo taken yet, you would have that child propped up and had a photo taken of it as if it were alive yet. Mm-hmm. And those pictures were cherished. And today that would be unheard of.
In an era where there were no other photos of that child taken, that's the only one.
Yep.
That you would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the next segment, we're going to be talking to a well-experienced ghost hunter who has actually done a little bit of ghost hunting at Stuhr Museum, if I'm not mistaken. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you both a question. I'm going to ask our special guest in the next segment the same question. Do you think that your love of all things spooky, I know that both of you kind of have an interest in Halloween and this sort of culture, do you think that comes from a love of history? Is it the stories that are spooky, that are, attached to people in history, or a location that make for the best spooky cultural sensations, I guess?
You get a lot of stories from museums and historic sites about the hauntings of the area. A lot of our historical hauntings, per se, come from, 100+ years ago. You don't hear a lot of modern ghosts. You always hear of the older kind of spooky things.
Mm-hmm. The legends. They need some time to. They need some time to build and to boil and to.
Well, I think one of the reasons I'm primarily a skeptic, and I'm not closing the door to believing. I'd like to believe, but I would just like there to be one example of a ghost who is not from the Victorian era. I feel like every single ghost story that exists is about either a woman in the white dress from 1875 or, the butler of a 150-year-old hotel who's still hanging out. But it's primarily those sort of stories.
I bet, though, if you started asking the question more often, you'd get more stories. I think people just don't talk about it when they really, really think that's the experience they had.
Yeah.
Right.
It's more fun to talk about the legends and I don't know either. I'm not necessarily a skeptic, but I'm not a full believer either. I like the idea that things can be solved and that mysteries can come down to a solution. And so that intrigue for me is when there's no more roads to take. And so then what?
Yeah.
And so that's a place that I like to explore.
Okay, I'm going to jump in for a second. This is
Mike Bakovin.
All right, so I'm producer of the show. No, it's fine. I just have, because I fall on Rob's spectrum here. I'm a skeptic. However, I'm also on the board of the Grand Theater here in downtown Grand Island. They swear, reasonable people I know swear up and down there are ghosts in that building, right? And so I said, oh, that's a bunch of crap. Prove it. And they sent me this. So in the basement of the Grand, there's a room that is marked on the schematics as the Void. No one knows why it's there, why it was built. It's just a room that's behind a wall. And so they had a ghost hunting group come out and they talked and they said, they went in there and they asked how many ghosts were down there. And here's the audio that was played.
How many of you are here?
And the rumor is
that's the actual recording.
That's the actual recording.
Can we hear that again?
Yeah,
here's what they think it says. They think it says, how many are here? They think it says too many to count. That's what they think they hear.
Take that with a grain of salt. Make up your own mind.
Exactly.
Don't let that convince you to what it says.
All right, one more time.
How many of you are here?
God.
I hear something else, and I'm not. There's too many syllables for too many to count.
Yeah, it's probably.
It doesn't sound layered.
It's probably not real, but you never.
You never know. I mean, that does sound pretty convincing.
It sounds awesome. It sounds like somebody was also there, and they just muttered something next to him.
Yeah,
that doesn't sound like. I don't know that I believe that it was just how the parameters that you just set up, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, but we could track that down and we can ask.
I wasn't there. I can't be sure that was really how the conditions were such to where that happened the way they told me.
We'd like an invitation to the Grand Theater, please.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to the Grand Theater next week, actually. And that might be a good place to leave this episode of the podcast, because next week we are going to be taking a trip outside of the Stuhr walls, and we're going to go to the Grand Theater to investigate that local icon in downtown Grand Island. So,
well, maybe we'll catch our own ghost recording while we're there.
We might as well try.
We could be the first. It'd be awesome.
Or second.
Yeah. Or third.
Yeah. Too many to count. Anyway, we'll leave it there. I'd like to thank Kari Stofer and Samantha Stump for being on the Stir Crazy podcast. We will be back after these words.
Today's podcast is brought to you by H.E. Clifford Attorney. H.E. Clifford Attorney, real estate and insurance agent with an office in the First State Bank in Railroad Town. We have a large list of improved farms for sale on a very favorable terms. Railroad tickets bought, sold, and exchanged, and we have notary services available.
Hello?
Hi, is this Kim?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Kim. This is Mike Bakoven of Stuhr Museum calling.
I'm expecting your call.
Awesome. Hi. I'm here with Rob Nelson, who's the host of the podcast.
Hi, how are you?
Hey. Hi, Rob. Nice to meet you.
Good to talk
over
to
the
you.
phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what. Do you mind if we just kind of dive right in and start asking about your exploits?
Not a problem. Go ahead. I'm ready.
All right. So, tell me a little bit about what it is that you do on a ghost hunt. How many have you been on? Just kind of like introduce us to the pursuit.
Well, it was a hobby, and I actually taught ghost hunting at Central Community College.
Oh, really?
Yes, I actually taught a class in it, and then we'd go on a ghost hunt, either to Trails and Rails in Kearney or Stuhr Museum.
Okay.
We would go and sit in a dark room with people.
Yeah.
That's basically what you do. I got started in it by having experiences with animals, believe it or not. I actually had a dog, and we put my dog to sleep because he was very, very old. He was 15, and he just couldn't function.
Oh, that's a good life for a dog. 15 is a good age.
Yeah, it was he didn't have a full life. I mean, it was just not worth putting him through the pain and stuff that he was going through. So, and then I was in Colorado at the time, and I went home. We actually put him to sleep here in Kearney and buried him out on my sister's farm, as you do with dogs.
Sure.
And I went home, and guess who followed me? My dog. But my dog wasn't alive.
Sure.
So I would actually still hear my dog's chain rattle and feel him jump on the bed in my bedroom, because that's where he slept, was on my bed.
Oh my gosh.
And that kind of piqued my interest.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And did this happen a long time?
This happened until I asked him not to do it anymore. I really seriously did. I told my dog out loud, speaking the words out loud, "I'm okay. You can go now."
Oh.
Never had an experience again. And then I remember as a child having the experience where we put my dog to sleep when I was a kid. We were a dog family, and because my dog then was like 20, it was a poodle and very old.
Wow.
And after we put the dog to sleep, I would hear him coming up the stairs. And my mom, who is definitely not a believer in all this rigmarole, as she calls it, said, "Oh yeah, I remember hearing that." And I'm going, "Mom,
Yeah.
what's going on?" But I guess when you go on a ghost hunt, it's not just going to a cemetery and listening. Okay, it's so much more than that.
Yes,
when we
please
talk
forgive
about-
our ignorance of this topic. We're hoping to learn just as much as we can from this interview. That's kind of the point of the whole show. So thank you for being willing to share anything with us.
Well, first you try a location. You have a location, whether it be a cemetery or a house or someplace, a historical location is always really good because a lot of went on. And the first thing you do is you go to Stuhr Museum and you go to the historical center there and you do research.
Sure.
Okay.
You don't just go into a place and say, "Hey, I wonder if this is haunted." You don't do that. You've got to do the research.
Well, that's what I wanted to kind of talk to you about and kind of tie into the museum here. I'm of the impression that the best ghost stories or anything that related to this subject has to have good history associated with it. I mean, you always hear about a 200-year-old hotel being haunted or a Civil War battlefield or something like that, but the research done by the individuals who believe in it is pretty well thought out and fleshed out. So I was going to ask if that played a significant role in this pursuit.
Oh, I've spent many an hour there at Stuhr Museum researching buildings. It's just a matter of you got to understand the location we're in. There's some things that I call ghost food that trigger your area. we're on water. Water is a food. It's what I call a ghost food because that's mineral. It has energy that actually feeds the entities. It actually gives them energy to move things and to manifest. And so water's one. Fire is another one. So if I had a friend who burned down a building and she's going, we had so much activity after that. I said, yes, you're feeding that energy. You're feeding that energy that's sitting there dormant. You're giving it what I call ghost food. Limestone's another one. And then the history. So when you think about the history, how many trails went through Nebraska and through this area with our Platte River? How many bodies are buried from Omaha to Denver? Seriously, how many bodies do you think? Tons, right?
Yeah.
And so there's your energy. There's your energy. Because as we know from, I hate to say this, Einstein, energy does not dissipate. It just dissolves. It doesn't go away. It doesn't stop. Energy doesn't stop. It transforms. So you'd have to think of many theories and do some research. But let's go back to the ghost hunt because I could go on and on
Sure.
about theories. I mean, Einstein, people, we're using Einstein for ghost hunting. Hello. Anyway, what it is that so you do your research. You find out who lived there, who died there, were there accidents. You look at that history too. Because you want to get those names and you want to use those names as trigger objects. So when you go to a location and you say, hey, Mr. Lesher lived here and I heard he had an accident or died, wow, that can say, oh, yeah, that's me. I'll show you I'm here. I want to be noticed.
Sure.
So those are things that you need to know. Was somebody smoking and the house burned down and they built it back up? Well, bring some cigarettes.
Yeah.
I mean, because that'll trigger it. We did a lot in we went to the Hall County Jail downtown, the old one where it used to be,
right
above the police station. I actually went there before they renovated it and deconstructed it and everything. I hunted there many times. So I've probably been on at least 75 to 80 hunts in my time. Some of them pretty scary locations.
Oh, yeah, I imagine. With your students, you mentioned you taught at CCC a class on this. Do you teach any sort of documentation or some kind of archival thing so that this research can be kept for other people to kind of look to in the future?
Basically, I teach them where to go. I don't teach them how to research. Most people, Ancestry.com can do a heck of a lot more to research and teaching people and giving them more information than I can. Going to the archives at Stuhr, saying, I want to look at this location. Whose farm was this first? What was built on there? Those are more documentation, is going in and asking the question. So we do go over a few questions on how to research it, but basically we're sticking to those who lived there, who died there, what happened there.
Absolutely.
Because those are the three that you really need to have a good understanding of what you may experience in that location.
Just out of curiosity, were you a history fan before you kind of fell into the ghost hunting side of it?
I love history. My father loved history. My family, I've loved history all my life. I'm a music teacher by trade. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Music Education. So maybe that's the weirdness in me that liked the ghost hunting. I don't know. But I'm actually, by trade, a music teacher.
I'm pleased to hear you say that. I know our curatorial staff here, all three of us are interested in this area. And I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that we're all very interested in history. And we love the stories. And we love to think about what's possible. And just all of that really sort of dovetails nicely together when you get into this subject.
And also you talk about history coming to life, as in the village.
Exactly.
You have history coming to life, and that's part of what you're talking about. Well, guess what? Sometimes it comes to life and it's not really there alive. Yeah. So sometimes it comes to life in a whole new way. Yeah. So we go through the history of it. That's number one. We go and we research the history of the houses. I usually have some of that already pulled up or ready to go as I've done my background checks. And the other thing we teach, the first thing we teach after history is safety. Safety is vital because you don't just go into a building.
Sure.
That's not really recommended. I'm a very, very, very devout Christian. I'm a Christian. I'll admit it to anyone who wants to hear it. And I believe that I need to protect myself. And I need to know what I can do to be safe, because I'm not going to take a bunch of people in to a location that isn't safe physically or spiritually. Okay? I'm very, very adamant about making sure that everybody is comfortable. They're never alone. You never, ever hunt alone. I know they show it all the times on TV. But you know what? Someone's holding that camera.
Yeah.
It's filming them.
Are you
tell
saying,
you folks this.
are you saying those ghost hunting shows might be a little bit overly produced?
You think,
Yeah.
but and you got to understand too. Those little hour programs or half-hour programs probably take a week to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just going in for 3 hours from 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. You know, it's not that. That's not what it is. They do this for several hours, and they do it overnight, and they say, oh, we'll just review it and stuff. It isn't that easy. People think it's easy. It's not. The other thing is, so safety is second. I mean, we want to do the history, but we want to be safe. Make sure that we go in and look at it with the lights on. You don't just go in the middle of the dark and trip over everything. That doesn't make sense.
That's a good point.
So you always want to go in and kind of look around and see how you feel. Opening up your feelings to it, but still protecting yourself is very important, because if you don't open yourself up, you're not going to have an experience. Because if you just close yourself off and just, I don't care, I don't believe, I can probably convince you a little bit, but you're not going to have as good of an experience. So first thing is history. You have to find out what's going on. Then you do your walkthrough for safety. Make sure you know where things are. Where can we sit? Where can't we sit? Also, another thing with safety is you don't take anything.
Hey, that's a good idea.
You don't use other people's equipment. You don't move things. Let the ghost move it. You don't need to move it. Let them do it. Because the thing is respect. We have to respect the location and, in essence, respect our entities that are not there any longer, our ghosts.
Sure.
You don't want to go in there asking for trouble. Zach Megan does it every time. Come hit me. You know, it's like, no, Zach. No, let's not do that. That's not very safe. So when I was teaching the class, we talked probably a fourth of the class just on safety.
Okay.
Because to me, that's important. Another part of safety is getting permission. You don't go to a cemetery in the middle of nowhere with your flashlights and everything else and not get permission. Okay?
Kim, if I could ask, what in your mind would be a successful ghost hunt? What do you hope to achieve every time you're out in the field?
I think that successful ghost hunts are the ones where you get an experience, and you don't always. It's not guaranteed. I have a couple things that I've learned that have actually had me give that experience and almost guarantee that experience. I have one special secret weapon that I use every time I go out, and it works every time.
Do you care to share it?
Sure. It's dowsing rods.
Oh, yeah, trying to find the water.
Right. Well, guess what? It also moves with energy. So you have your energy from your, which is called, EMF, electromagnetic fields or energy. Those will move those dowsing rods. I have never had an experience where I haven't had my dowsing rods move on me when I ask questions. Ever. It is an immediate response. It is a very visual response, and it's very easy for them to manipulate them.
Okay.
For the entities to manipulate. And you don't need these 4-foot-long ones.
Yeah, they make some long ones, yeah.
They're about $15, I think, on Amazon, is where I got mine. And they have the little sleeve over the place where you hold it, so you're not touching the rod itself. So, and we have techniques for that. Hold your arms in, don't have your arms just hanging out there because they're going to shake a little bit and that can move the rod. You want to hold it pretty steady and close to you, but make it so it can move. And I've always had, I ask a question, I ask them to cross it, and they cross the rods, and then I ask them to uncross it, and they uncross the rods. I have always had that success.
Cool.
If I could ask another question, just
Sure.
I'm sure it varies, but when you go into a place after you've taken all the correct precautions, what sort of feelings come about, or have you encountered in terms of like senses, emotions, feelings? Is it just kind of different on every location? Is it? I'm sure it's not universal, but
I'm pretty much gotten to the technique. I wasn't like it at first. They like me. I don't know why. Maybe because I talk to them like they're real, and I'm acknowledging. Because I think that's what most ghosts and people who see ghosts, they wonder why they're showing you. It's because they want to be acknowledged. They want to be. They know they're not sure they're dead in the first place because they don't know how they died, but they want to be acknowledged. And so when you talk to them in the manner I talk to them, because I have a very motherly, friendly manner, I sing to them sometimes. I react to them, but they react to me pretty easily. But I'll go into a room and I'll say, I don't like that corner over there. There's something in that corner over there. I don't know why I know that. I just have this feeling that something's over there. And I go over and sit near the corner and things start happening. So it's just open yourself up to the energies around you. It's just funny because my favorite thing on every ghost hunting show, and I tell my students this too, when you ask for a knock and it happens, don't freak out. You asked for it.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen a ghost hunting show, show us you're here, knock on the wall, boom, boom, boom. Ah! They start screaming. It's like, hello, did you not just ask for that?
Yeah. Well, can I ask real quick? So, what sort of you've had experiences out at Stuhr Museum then?
Yes, I have.
What's I hate to put it this way, but what's kind of the vibe out here? Are people pretty friendly or no?
You know what? I've never had a negative experience. There's not darkness. There's not evil. I've never felt that out there.
That's good to know.
I felt more like people that are just in their other world, so to speak, just living their lives. I don't feel anything negative. I've seen doors move. I've seen breezes, cold spots. I've gotten a few minor EMP, some electronic voice phenomenons, EVPs, and I've hunted with a lot of people and just kind of gotten feelings. Sometimes you get a feeling over you. It's like you're perfectly fine, all of a sudden you're really sad. So I've had those experiences out there, but nothing ever negative, ever. And I would know. I would know. Because I've been to the Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa, where there ain't nothing but negative there.
Really?
So I know the feelings. And none of those were at Stuhr, but you know what? It was still, you were with people that weren't there. You're kind of like sitting in and watching their lives progress after they're gone. And they are there. And they do watch.
Well, that's comforting to hear. I mean, that there's nothing malignant necessarily happening.
No, nothing negative at all. I've never had anything negative.
Kim, what would you say to the skeptic out there who just says all of this can be explained away by the wind or, a drafty house or, things like that sort of explain away any of the phenomena that we're talking about?
I don't try to convince the non-believers. Because I've dealt with the people who are too believing, the people who are like me that are, I believe that there's probably something out there, but if I can't prove it, because my goal is only, I don't believe it if I can't prove it.
Absolutely.
Okay? If I see something move, then I'm going to look around and see if there's anything that could say that that's not right, and that's not true, or this happened, or there was a breeze. We don't look to prove things. We look to disprove things. Because when you can't disprove it, that's when it gets interesting.
Kim, I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Oh, no problem. It's been lots of fun.
Cool.
Well, we'll keep in touch, and maybe next year around this time we'll do it again on another episode of the Halloween edition.
I bet you've got a lot more stories that you could share.
Oh, tons. Tons.
Thanks.
Thank you. This concludes another episode of the Stir Crazy podcast. I had some fun with this one. It was a special episode talking about all things altogether ooky and spooky.
Yeah, it was a little bit different for us, but man, definitely got some chills. And history and mythology, they're tied together. It's one of those things where I think that's what you can take away from it is that history has its place, but mythology also has its place, and sometimes the Venn diagrams overlap. Yeah, I really just wanted to point out that as unrelated as maybe something like ghost hunting and history might seem, they really do have quite a bit in common, as Kim kind of highlighted, the schematics of the blueprints of a successful ghost hunt.
do entail a lot of research and digging and knowing your stuff and fact finding and all those things that we do here at the museum on a daily basis.
Absolutely. So what are we doing next week as we move into the third episode of season 3?
Yeah, so next week we're actually leaving the Stuhr Museum and we're heading out into the community. We are going to head out to the Grand Theater in downtown Grand Island, and we are going to be speaking with, who are we speaking with?
Jim Pohl, who is the, I'm going to say the operations manager. He's been on the board since this nonprofit theater became a nonprofit theater. Of course, before that it was a regular theater here in town, but it's got a very neat story, and there's a lot of history tied up with that place. So we'll be coming back with that in about a week's time.
Yes, we'll also be joined again by the famous Kay Sonova, our director of interpretation. So I'll be having a historical conversation with her about the movie theater industry in general, and I look forward to that as well.
In a time when you can't go to the movies, this might be the next best thing. So come back in a week.
Absolutely. We will see you then.